Okay. Well, last year, Saudi Arabia had one of its first deficit years in who knows how long, maybe ever. They, as a result, had to make up and sell $100 billion worth of bonds. Now, they've got the Yemeni war going on, they've got, a oil price that's not worth shit. And I made the majority of this video just after Christmas last year, never got to upload it, and at the time it was newer news, very new news, that they actually intended to tax their populace, which they've never done before, ever since a long time back anyway. And there's different things they've done to avoid an Arab Spring uprising, combined with a low oil price, that sort of led to this thing of now wanting to tax their people, and this $100 billion worth of bonds that they ultimately got to pay back for the first deficit they've had in donkey's ages. And I talk about all that in the majority of this video. In the meantime, as of only a couple of days ago, literally, Venezuela has been pushing for a few weeks, probably since last year, for a meeting of the OPEC countries, have another OPEC meeting. Venezuela has been doing it really hard since the middle of about 2015. And their whole economy is based on a socialist economy, which is fed almost entirely by oil money to keep it going. And it really, they've been struggling to get enough dunny paper to wipe their ass, quite literally, since the middle of last year. So they've been pushing for an OPEC meeting. Now that the price has really gutted out badly, they've all decided to come together for an OPEC meeting, and all of them decided that it was time that they got to work out a plan to lower production to bolster the price to a level that means they can still wipe their ass, literally. So anyway, they all turned up to that, and Saudi Arabia did, after a lot of coaxing, and put its foot down and said, no, we don't want to change anything the way it is. Now, they're one of the main people behind OPEC, but they have decided that they don't want to cut production because they don't even understand. They don't understand supply and demand. First of all, you've got a weak economy worldwide, which means that the demand's going to be fuck all because production's fuck all. And to top that off, they want to get out of this $100 billion debt as quick as they can, but they've got some idea that if they increase production and sell as much as they can, they're going to get out of the debt faster, but all they've done is flooded the market and made it worth nothing. So anyway, on with the main video about their ideas to tax their people to get out of the debt, as well as the overproduction of oil, in the mistaken belief that they'll pay it off faster as opposed to drive the price to jack shit, which is exactly what's happened. Alrighty, well, as of about 12 hours ago, something has happened which you probably didn't even know about, which could have a bit of a bearing on the US dollar at a later date. Now, those of you who didn't know, in 1968 the gold window was temporarily closed, and it was permanently closed in 1971 by Richard Nixon during what's known as the Nixon shock. And basically it went from the US dollar backed by gold to the US dollar backed by oil. Basically, instead of many other currencies being pegged against the US dollar, they with the exception of maybe the Hong Kong dollar and I think the Chinese yuan. They basically moved to a foreign exchange system of floating currency values, Forex as it's known today. Now, part of the attempt to shore up the value of the US dollar was the little OPEC dealio, and basically OPEC countries, of which Saudi Arabia is the main player, guaranteed to trade their oil in US dollars in exchange for US military protection, and by extension guaranteeing the continuity of their governments, i.e. almost guaranteeing their dictatorships by US armed forces. Long story short, that's pretty much what it guaranteed. But it wasn't just trading their oil in US dollars, they also agreed to buy a certain percentage of the oil money would go to buying US government bonds. Now, in some of these places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, however you want to say it, and I think Kuwait's pretty much the same, these people have realised they're not going to get freedoms and rights and all this sort of stuff from their governments. But they do know there's a lot of money coming in, so, well, that's one thing they can nuzzle out of them is money. And in Qatar, if you're born there, you basically get given, I think it's $80,000 a year. Now, you know how in Alaska they get oil royalties? Well, imagine getting $80,000 a year per person in oil royalties. I think it's, United Arab Emirates is, they're pretty much the same as well. They expect a bit of money and whatnot. And on top of that, they also get their electricity and their natural gas for free and stuff like that in Qatar. But, there's been a lot of money flowing around in all these places, but it hasn't stopped their spending. In other words, the populace is spending, and even though they're on $80,000 a year, they still spend more than they're getting in Qatar, with plenty of people go that way. The smart ones screw their head on and don't spend any more than $80,000 a year. Must be very hard to do. And well, as you all know, there was a little Arab Spring uprising in a whole bunch of different countries, and Iran had protests. Saudi Arabia even had some failed flop protests that didn't last very long. And in other countries like Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, there was a dramatic shift and change in government. And yeah, but Saudi Arabia got out of that by appeasing people. How did they appease them? By paying off their debts up to the value of $100,000. Could you imagine if your government went around and paid off your debt to the value of $100,000, not by inflating the currency, but by literally just bloody well paying it off, and you didn't wake up the next day to hyperinflation? To the value of $100,000 per person. What the fuck? Well, that's what they done in Saudi Arabia. And that appeased the people for a while, but as of about 6 months ago, they still felt duped because they're sort of used to getting a lot of money, and giving them more money, well, not actually giving it to them, but just paying their debts off, didn't sort of really appease their want for a change of government, which, as of a few months ago, sort of surfaced again when this letter went around demanding the resignation of the king. And I may say this king hasn't been in a great deal of time, really. How long's it been? What, 6, 9 months, something? Yeah. What basically happened was the government that's usually got heaps of money actually got itself into debt, paying off other people's debts, but now that still didn't appease them enough, and they still sort of want more freedoms and stuff. And, well, in the brilliant minds of the Saudi Arabian government, they realised they were in debt. What are we going to do to get out of debt? You know what they decided to do? Increase the oil production when oil price was already at friggin' terrible lows that haven't been seen since the early 90s. What do you think that done? What we'll do is we'll make up for the debt by selling more of this cheap commodity that's already cheap. And yeah, they flooded the market and they made it even cheaper. And I'm seeing fuel prices over here, which I have not seen for about 3 years at least, especially with the propane. And I was paying 68 to 72 cents a litre, and I thought that was never going to change. It's back to 56 cents a litre. You know, and it's cheap. It's cheap again. But this is the whole thing. By flooding the market, they drove the price down even more, which Western economists predict, and I watched them predicting it. But no, they went ahead and kept selling it. Then, you know, they kept producing, they kept sucking out a higher level in a lame attempt to try and pay off debts faster, which, yeah, just as everybody predicted, flooded the market, drove the price down. And now they've decided, well, we've got to go for a new plan. We've got these citizens of ours, which we've never taxed for years because we had so much oil money we didn't need to tax them. And they were actually getting money given to them by us to keep them all happy. And now we've decided that to pay off the debts, we're going to tax them all. Ooh, decided probably yesterday, come out with about 12 hours ago. Yeah. In case they weren't pissed a few months ago when they asked for the resignation of the Saudi king, they're going to be real pissed by being taxed for the first time, let me tell you. And they'll be thinking, what the hell is this shit? And, yeah. They may just have another spring uprising on their hands. The other big thing is, as I sort of mentioned, I think I mentioned all this when the letter was circulating for the, you know, king to be given the boot, demanding his abdication. Couple little things. First of all, it's not a true fucking kingdom. It was installed by the British Empire 80 years ago. Second of all, they apparently are not even really from the centre of the country. They're from sort of more the northern parts of the country or something like that. They're not even really true Saudis, as it turns out. They're a minority. They're not part of the majority populace or something. But it doesn't end there. It gets a lot worse. A lot worse. The old guy was 80 years old or whatever, carked it, and they put this new guy in as of 9 months ago, whenever it was. He's about 55 years of age. When the old guy died, it was pretty obvious that he was the next heir. No real questions about it. He just pretty much stepped straight in. Everybody knew he was coming in for years and years in advance. But, you know, he's got diabetes, a whole stack of health problems to the point that he's probably not going to live a hell of a lot longer anyway. He's quite a sick man. And below him, well, there's only about 45 different heirs to squabble it out. So if he does abdicate, you got any one of 45 different people that could come in. And, you know, if you've just thrown taxation on people that have never been taxed as well, when only 3 years ago you were paying out their debts, oh, it's not going to go good. It's not going to go good at all. And this may have an on-flow effect, you know. All it would really need to happen is for that current king to die of one of his many different health problems, and it will cause all hell. But, you know, taxing people that have never been taxed, no, it might just be a step too far. And anyway, I just thought I'd tell you guys, and we'll see what comes out of all this.